To suffer without growing from suffering is to choose weakness. Have you ever encountered someone who, no matter the circumstances, always seems to be the victim? They may be charming, gentle, even self-deprecating, but there's something deeply unsettling about their constant need for sympathy. They seem helpless, yet you can't help but feel like the world always owes them something. You might wonder, is it possible that nothing is ever truly their fault? Today on Unmask, we unravel the subtle yet powerful role of the victim in modern relationships. Not the victim of trauma, but the emotional manipulator who thrives on being helpless. The person who wears their suffering like a mask to control those around them. Man is nothing else but what he makes of himself. Jean-Paul Sartre. We live in an age of constant projection, where reality is often shaped less by what is and more by what we need it to be. Nowhere is this more visible than in the victim archetype, a role so deeply ingrained it's often mistaken for identity. But before psychology gave it a name, philosophy gave it a mirror. From the Stoics to the existentialists, thinkers throughout history have warned us. Suffering is real, but victimhood is a choice. Seneca, in Letters to Lucilius, once wrote, "We suffer more often in imagination than in reality." What did he mean? That pain is inevitable, but how we frame that pain becomes the lens through which we view the world. When that lens becomes distorted, pain becomes identity, and identity becomes power. Silent, corrosive power. This is where the philosophical roots of the victim mindset begin. 1. Victimhood and moral superiority. At first glance, the victim seems powerless, but look deeper, and you'll see a paradox. A person who constantly claims to be harmed by others, who is always the one misunderstood, betrayed, or taken advantage of, often harbors a hidden moral weapon. I suffer, therefore I am right. Nietzsche warned about this reversal of values, where weakness is turned into virtue and strength is demonized. Whoever fights monsters should see to it that in the process he does not become a monster. Friedrich Nietzsche. The victim fights perceived injustice, but over time begins to become the injustice, inflicting guilt on others for not catering to their pain. This dynamic creates an ethical trap. We feel bad for them. We validate them. We adjust ourselves around them, and slowly, without noticing, we begin to orbit their wound, not their reality. 2. Sartre's bad faith and the escape from responsibility. In existentialist thought, particularly in Sartre's concept of bad faith, mauvaise foi, individuals avoid the anxiety of freedom by hiding behind roles. The victim, then, is not just hurting, they are hiding from responsibility, from the painful truth that they are also capable of causing harm. To Sartre, the moment you say, "I am this way because of what others did to me," you stop becoming. You freeze your essence. But to grow, to become conscious, to exist authentically, means to say, "I was hurt, and I still choose to be better." This is the power the victim archetype refuses to grasp, because holding on to pain is easier than changing it. 3. The comfort of suffering. Carl Jung said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own soul." Why does the victim cling to pain? Because it gives them identity, and more importantly, attention. This is not always conscious. In many cases, it's a deeply rooted survival mechanism. A child who received love only when they cried eventually learns pain equals connection. As adults, this belief mutates, manifesting as emotional manipulation. If I am hurt, people will stay. This sets the stage for emotional blackmail, a dynamic we will explore in the next segments. But the philosophical truth is chilling. By turning pain into personality, the victim trades healing for control. And in doing so, they don't just suffer. They make others suffer with them. The psychological roots of the victim personality are not simply emotional, they are structural. At the core lies a fragmented sense of agency. People with this personality type often externalize all sources of difficulty, perceiving themselves as perpetual recipients of harm, betrayal, or misfortune. The world happens to them, never through them. 1. Learned helplessness. First defined by psychologist Martin Seligman, learned helplessness occurs when an individual repeatedly experiences negative outcomes beyond their control. Over time, they stop trying altogether, believing their actions are futile. In a victim's psyche, this develops into a self-reinforcing loop. Why try? Nothing I do will change anything. Why speak up? No one ever listens. Why take responsibility? I'm always the one who gets hurt. This mentality is deceptively comforting. It provides certainty in identity and absolves responsibility. And slowly, the belief becomes a core schema, a filter through which all future interactions are interpreted. 2. The emotional economy of victimhood. Psychologist Stephen Karpman outlined the drama triangle consisting of 3 roles: victim, rescuer, and persecutor. In this dynamic, the victim often attracts rescuers, people who enable their behavior through empathy, guilt, or savior complexes. What the victim receives: sympathy without accountability, attention without effort, power through powerlessness. But there's a dark twist. When the rescuer fails to save them adequately, they are instantly recast as the persecutor. Thus, emotional intimacy is weaponized, becoming a tool for passive control. 3. Projection and identity fusion. Many victim types unconsciously project their unacceptable traits, envy, anger, selfishness, onto others. This is called projective identification. Instead of facing their own shadow, they say, "You're the manipulative one. You're making me feel guilty. I'm the one being wronged." This leads to identity fusion. They cannot separate their feelings from facts, their pain from moral authority, their trauma from their personality. Thus, any challenge to their narrative becomes a threat to selfhood. They don't just defend their experiences, they defend their entire existence. Let me tell you the story of Maya. Maya was a woman in her early 30s who seemed to have it all. She was quiet, calm, and appeared to live a peaceful life. But there was something about Maya that always felt off. She had a boyfriend, Alex, who loved her deeply. They'd been together for years, but Alex always felt like he couldn't quite win with her. No matter what he did, Maya always seemed to need more. At first, it seemed like simple, emotional neediness. She'd text him at all hours, saying things like, "I feel so alone today. You don't understand me. Why don't you ever show up when I need you the most?" Alex tried his best. He'd apologize. He'd buy her flowers. He'd cancel plans to spend time with her. But the more he gave, the more she demanded. She would have outbursts of tears when he didn't respond the way she expected. At times, she seemed genuinely broken. She'd say, "I just can't take it anymore. You don't love me like you used to." For months, Alex found himself walking on eggshells. He questioned his every word, his every action, and even his own sanity. But one day, Alex finally reached his limit. After an emotional argument, Maya made him feel so guilty for not being there when she needed him the most. He couldn't help but ask, "Why do you always do this to me?" Maya's eyes filled with tears. She shook her head. "I'm just the victim of life's circumstances," she said softly. "I never asked for this pain. It just happens to me." In that moment, Alex realized it wasn't just his fault. Maya had been playing the victim for so long, she had convinced him that he was the problem. And with that realization came a terrifying truth. She wasn't helpless. She was manipulating him into carrying her emotional weight. You may not meet a textbook case of this personality in your life, but you've likely encountered echoes of it. Let's explore what the victim archetype looks like in real life. Story 1. The emotional blackmailer meet Lila. She's charming, deeply sensitive, and often speaks about how people always leave her. At first, you feel drawn to her vulnerability. You want to help. You want to stay. But over time, she sulks when you make other friends. She guilt-trips you for needing space. She makes every problem about herself. If you call her out, she cries, "I can't believe you'd say that after all I've been through." You realize it's not just sadness. It's emotional blackmail. And if you're not careful, you'll start shrinking your needs to avoid hurting her again. This is how victimhood becomes a trap. Common symptoms: constant external blame, never taking accountability, passive aggression, indirect hostility disguised as hurt, emotional hostage-taking, threatening to self-harm or fall apart if challenged, chronic complaining without solutions, subtle undermining of others' joy or success. Not every victim type is abusive, but the pattern is consistent. Pain becomes performance, and guilt becomes a tool. He who cannot take responsibility for his actions cannot claim freedom. Jordan Peterson. The worst thing you can do for those you love is the things they could and should do for themselves. Abraham Lincoln. Let's deconstruct these. The victim type craves freedom from pain, but often refuses the cost of freedom, which is responsibility. They want love without risk, attention without vulnerability, connection without self-awareness. But as Viktor Frankl once said, between stimulus and response there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. Victims collapse that space. Everything becomes automatic, reactive, emotionally charged, and in doing so, they abdicate power while claiming they have none. But let's be clear, many victim types were genuinely hurt. Many carry real trauma. The problem is when pain becomes identity, and identity becomes immovable. Healing demands we do what the victim archetype fears most: own our shadow. Admit we hurt others too. Stop needing others to validate our wounds in order to feel real. Carl Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." The victim says, "This is just who I am." But the philosopher says, "No, this is who you've been. Now, who will you become?" If you're caught in the web of a victim, how do you break free? First, you must recognize the pattern. The victim thrives on emotional dependency. They need your empathy more than they need your support. Second, you must set boundaries. Setting boundaries is not about being cruel or unfeeling. It's about preserving your mental health and respecting your own needs. The strongest people are those who are not afraid to say, "I am not responsible for your happiness." Unknown. Third, don't fall for guilt manipulation. The victim will guilt you into doing things for them. Learn to say no and stick to it. Lastly, seek therapy. If you've been involved with a person like this, you may need guidance in healing and reestablishing your own identity. You are not their savior. You are your own person with your own needs. If you've ever felt like the weight of someone else's victimhood was slowly crushing you, you're not alone. But now, you have the knowledge to protect yourself. Thank you for watching Unmask, where we strip away the masks of toxic personalities and reveal the truths they hide beneath. Next week, we'll dive deep into another dark trait, the gaslighter. You won't want to miss it.